Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Cross Commission podcast. I am Jake Nazar. I am joined this evening by my good pal, Safe. Safe, how you doing?
Jake, oh man, the carousel couldn't let it, have us a quiet summer. Absolutely not. Coaching carousel in
No,
full effect.
no, we are. This is Wednesday evening that we're taping this, so only 4 days after we did the Crosses, and basically put a bow on the 2025 season. We figured we'd be coming to you again in a couple weeks, but then we got the last yesterday evening, got the pretty shocking news that Penn has made a coaching change. Mike Murphy, who had been at Penn for 16 years, and I believe is the winningest coach in school history, has been let go. We'll dive into that. Obviously, that's the why we're here, is to discuss our thoughts on Mike Murphy being out at Penn, what could be next, possible names on the list for the Quakers, but a pretty stunning coaching change for a lot of reasons, as we could dive into the timing, the move itself. It's not too far removed from when Penn was a top 10 team. And this is certainly the biggest job that opened this cycle. And I would say it's probably the biggest job that's opened since Hopkins. Or
Yeah.
Cuse opened. Cuse opened a year after that. But that, it didn't really open. They just took the job. So I would say, yeah, I'm trying to think of anything, because Denver again, just they promoted Brown. So I'm struggling to think of anything in the last couple of years that's been as significant an opening as this is. So definitely one that could command a lot of attention and interest. But again, we'll see how the time frame of this plays a part. We're right in the midst of recruiting season. I'm pretty sure. I think Mike Murphy was still out recruiting apparently for Penn. So that is what we're going to dive into on this evening show. Before we get into that, there have been a couple other fillings in the coaching carousel. The first job that opened up about 2 months ago was St. Bonaventure, letting go of Randy Mearns, and they have filled that position with Brendan Storier, who was the head coach at Limestone. Limestone, of course, as university shuttering its doors. So Brendan Storier was in need of a job, and St. Bonaventure was in need of a coach, and they've tapped him. This one came a couple weeks ago, but we didn't get a chance to touch on it since we've done a pod. Hobart promoted Stephen Brundage from offensive coordinator to head coach to replace Greg Raymond. And then the other one that we still have two current openings. VMI head coach James Papura is leaving to be the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. So two jobs currently open, VMI and Penn. Penn, obviously the most significant of those. And then two jobs have been filled, St. Bonaventure and Hobart. Safe, before we jump into Penn, any thoughts on the moves at Hobart or St. Bonaventure?
Brundage, who bandied about in the chat, just like given maybe the limitations of who they could get, that an elevation may have been like the path of least resistance. I don't want to be cynical or anything like that, but ended up being the case. The Hobart job, I think there was a lot of speculation on the boards, on the on Twitter as well, maybe some big names, but at the end, maybe just didn't command the market that Hobart alums thought it would. Probably, just Penn one is going to take the bulk of our attention. But yeah, I can understand the decisions of the Hobart decision. I don't know that much. I'm not going to find about a Limestone Lacrosse. I know we were joking around. I too thought it was in the Northeast. I thought it was
Yeah.
I was like, this sounds like a school in Connecticut, you know, or
Yeah, it sounds like a school like Upper New, like Northern New York or something.
like Western Mass, you know, something like that. You know, it's just like yeah, a little bit of a necessity for on both parts, you know, but needing a job and you know, Hobart needing that to be filled. So, but I, you know, from what I have followed, you know, seen some people who are more into you know, non D1 men's lacrosse. Like Limestone is a name, you know, and you know, I think it was like, you know, I don't know, if gamble's the right word, but you know, it's a little bit outside the box thinking, but you know, maybe the you know pays off much greater than the expected. Like I said, Barron's did a good job, you know, kind of bringing St. Bonaventure out of his infancy, but like we're kind of see like kind of with this Penn move and others, you know, like the more I think like we look back, like yes, the timing could have been probably a lot, you know, more of what we're used to, but the pace is getting faster. You know, it's like that line from Slim Charles, like you know, the game's the game. It's just more fierce, and I think like the demands from the school, from seeing like teams in the conference, especially in the Ivy, a lot more success than. But I can't wait to you know to let you clear out the lane because I know you had some great stats about like you know the dearth of winning in the Ivy for 40 years, but for like two teams. And now you're starting to see, you know, obviously Yale like elevated itself, Harvard making a move, Dartmouth having a much more you know improved season than prior. Like I think Penn's just like why not us, you know, type thing. You know?
Every job except for Yale has turned over in the Ivy in the last 10 years. That's pretty crazy.
Maybe kind of maybe aggressive is not the right word, but like an affirmative move from the administration. Like Wojcik, what's like contract ran. I don't want to like misremember exactly, but
I have to go look it up.
But like I'm thinking of that, and I'm thinking of Callahan and Dartmouth, and it's just again like both of those were just like what were really maybe the fans' expectations, and then all of a sudden kind of realizing like the administration and the fans, and probably the coach obviously as well, but the administration's like no, we actually have different expectations, and we're going to move in a different direction. So yeah, like aggressive or like you know more affirmative moves, and like who knows what's going on in the background. Like Yale kind of showed it, you know, shout out to Uncle Joe Cy, like you know we love him, but here the pod, but you know with just get one big backer who's really into the sport, you can kind of change things around kind of quickly, not quickly, but like you know took Shea really kind of 10 years for everything to like really start cooking and stuff, but you know I'm saying like but there's still like a great line of like, hey, we're progressing going forward, making a tournament, competing against the top teams, and finally, you know, culminating the championship and you know the return to the championship game the next season. Like, yeah, that's before Shea. Like, would someone have seen that like that 10, 12-year run? Yeah, probably not. But like you know, like I said, like different expectations from the administration, buttressed by like an enthused alum, like. Penn's got a lot of like, you know, finance boys. I went through that school with the board. It's, you know, you just need one. And maybe they've got one. I don't know. But that's my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the, that's probably one of the stories here. I think there's a couple interesting things to look at. It makes this a very interesting move. There's that this is on the heels of an Ivy League national championship win with Cornell. Throw that in with Yale winning a national championship back in 2018. You've had 2 of the last 7 national champions are from the Ivy League. Prior to that, Princeton was the only Ivy League team to win a national championship for pretty much 40 years. And so I think that's definitely one of the elements at play here. As far the Wojcik thing, I'm going straight to the source because Chris broke the news when it happened way back when, so I just DM'd him and see if we can. I think he was let go. I think he still had time on his contract, but I could be wrong. But yeah, the Ivy League turnover does play some credence into this. Now, some of this there was a period of time about 15 years or so ago, and we've talked about this on the pod before, where coaches were getting out of the Ivy League. Brian Volker left. Mike Murphy replaced Brian Volker, who left Penn for Drexel. Jeff Tambroni left Cornell for Penn State. There might have been some other things at play there.
Petro.
Yeah, Petro way back when. I mean, that was an obvious one. He left for Hopkins. John Tillman left Harvard for Maryland.
Uncle Lars.
That was an uplift. Yes, Lars Tiffany left Brown for Virginia, which on the face of it is like, oh, you leave Brown for. But if you remember, at one point, Lars Tiffany looked pretty close to leaving Brown for Penn State. So there was a lot of turnover in the Ivy came from coaches leaving to take other jobs. Now we're starting to see more turnover from coaches being, as say mentioned, let go, fired, however you want to put it. Not
resigned. Yes, maybe
yeah, however you want to. Chris says he don't think he ever found out. Wojcik sent a message to recruits saying he would not return when it happened. So my assumption is he was let go, but I'll double check on that later. Brendan Callahan at Dartmouth, certainly his overall tenure might not have been super successful, but he had got that program. They'd rolled the boulder up the hill, and he had his best season when he was let go. And listen, Sean Kerwin's done a good job at Dartmouth so far, so it seems like maybe it's bearing fruit, but that's one of them. Chris Wojcik being let go at Harvard goes with that. He had some success there. He had taken them to the NCAA tournament in 2014. It was the first time they had made the tournament in nearly a decade. And he had a couple other teams that came, I think 2016, they got to the Ivy League championship. But he was 65 and 65, 500, and he got let go for Jerry Byrne. And Jerry Burns made 2 NCAA tournaments now in the past couple of years. There at Harvard. That's Harvard. That's Dartmouth. The Princeton one came in obviously a bit different circumstances with when Chris Bates got let go in the middle of the season, and then Matt Madelon they lifted the interim tag in the offseason. But now you throw Penn in here, Brown, which obviously turned over because of when Lars left, but Mike Daly was fired last year, and John Torpy took the job. So, and Cornell did fire Matt Kerwick, and promoted Milliman, and then Milliman left for Hopkins, and they promoted Busick. So everyone except for Yale, and some have turned over multiple times, and performance has been a factor. Results have been a factor. So that's one element of this. I think it's hard, not to kind of look. This search, I think, is going to be really interesting to break down because it's not often in college lacrosse where you have an athletic director who's let go of 2 coaches in 5 years at 2 different schools. And you can kind of, based off that, I feel like, get an idea for maybe where this search could go. Alana Wren, who is the AD at Penn, was the athletic director at Hopkins in 2020 when they let go of Dave Petramala.
Alana Wren, and as Hopkins fans would know, Shanahan, because I think got married and something that changed her name. But yeah, this is a Hopkins. Sorry to steal your thunder, Jake. But yeah, you're absolutely right. She's the hitter's hitter.
I mean, yeah, like this.
She came to Hopkins 2019. John Petro went to Penn 2021. It was just like an absolute, just like in and out job. But
now she's Mike Murphy's been let go as well. So I think that's interesting because I do think it gives you an idea, a blueprint into what might be the thought process here. I think we'll dive into that a little later. And then I think the timing of it as well. What does the timing of it say about their level of investment into the program, the expectations? Because I think there's 2 ways to look at this. I think letting go of Mike Murphy, on the face of it, kind of says we're looking for more, and we're looking to get to where Cornell is and where Princeton is and compete for Ivy League championships and maybe even Final Fours. I think the flip side of that is, before I'll let you go and say, is you fire the coach in late June and you essentially have submarined the next coach for an entire recruiting class. Now, it's a little different because it's Penn, and Ivies are always going to a degree recruit themselves because of there's going to be players who are interested in going to Penn or any Ivy League school because of the education. But nonetheless, whoever the coach is when they take over, it's kind of going to lose this recruiting year. Like they're going to be significant. Like it's going to be simply harder to get recruits in this class for whoever takes over. What does the timeline suggest that this was a rushed, haphazard decision? And maybe say, well, if this was really your priority, if you were really zeroed in on making the right hiring an upgrade and making a right call for the program, you would have done it sooner and have this done already. Have someone ready to go for recruiting and have look, they got to get assistants in. So I think you can look at that one of two ways. I think certainly, yes, there is the side of it that's like, hey, there's higher expectations here. They want to win. The other side is like the timeline doesn't necessarily indicate that this was the most efficient decision, let's say. And I wonder how that looks to coaches.
One thing we've always talked about, like the separation between the coach, like if it's done at the end of the contract, like we're not in really coach circles, but like I think that's looked up differently than being let go. So, and a couple of points. So I love what you said about like Penn's like intentions, but one thing I want to first note at like just looking at Woj's exit from Harvard and their like press release. You know, obviously, shout out to Chris, he broke it, then confirmed by other sources, and then like, shortly thereafter came out the press release. There was definitely like Woj is in the release, like, but there's been a privilege to talk to Harvard, cherish relationships. It would seem like they had a talk, and it was just like, I think this is best if we maybe change, but maybe it was mutual, whatever. It was like more amicable is what I would go with, like that.
And now before I'll cut you up before let's go, I say this. Look, we've had Chris Wojcik on the pod. Like, all respect to Chris Wojcik. His tenure at Harvard is not as successful as Mike Murphy's was at Penn. I mean, and that's not to say Chris Wojcik did a bad job at Harvard. I don't think he did, but I'm saying like Mike, as we talk about, Mike Murphy is the winningest head coach in Penn history. Like, I mean, his tenure, and the only one you can compare it to is Tony Seaman, and Tony Seaman coached during the 80s. Like, we're talking, considering, like you mentioned, the level, the difference in, and I'm sure you'll get to it, Penn's statement for Mike Murphy. He's not quoted in there. Like, that's significant. Like, I mean, again, like, you're not just replacing a coach who was there for 5 or 6 years, whatever it might be. You're replacing a guy who was there for 16 years and was like achieved significant success to some degree. Again, Tony Seaman in the 80s, they made a Final Four, almost unprecedented levels of success there, considering what the previous 30 years had been. 20 years, I would say. He took over in 2011. All right. Sorry, good job. Continue.
Oh, absolutely. And again, love Woj, friend of the pod. But, the record was 65 and 65.
Yeah.
But Harvard made sure to mention, like, featured 3 Ivy League tournament finals appearances, recorded a pair of 10-win seasons, took Harvard to the first Ivy League title in 24 years in 2014, and a berth in the NCAA tournament, first one since 2006. Like, it was, almost like we were reluctant. Like, you can see from the paragraph from Bob Scalise, we're grateful for Chris's leadership, knows how much the program means. So there's a lot more, effusive in praise of both parties.
Yeah.
The Penn release, and I'm happy to keep talking about like Murphy's success, because to answer to go back to your initial point about like their goals, I was like, we just see, Director of Athletics and Recreation Bren's statement is like, I want to thank Mike for his service to Penn's men's lacrosse and student athletes for the past 16 years. Kind of a perfunctory, just like thanks. And then right into almost like the while is like taking the space of but. When someone says something, it's like after but like is actually what's like important, and and everything before that could be kind of described. While like is a softens a blow, is like while difficult, the change in leadership is needed to elevate the men's cross program to compete for Ivy and national championships. We wish Mike and his family the best. They didn't repeat his record, but if you're just looking at the record, 16 years, 109, 96 record, 44 and 40 mark in Ivy League. He was also an assistant coach at Penn from 2001 to 2002. They haven't scrubbed Coach Murphy's page, and I don't think it's so acrimonious like we have seen like some schools to zap people's pages like right after the separation. But Coach Murphy, they've updated the coaching roster page, but Murphy's actual profile page. So, all-time winnings coach at Penn, 109 wins, entering 2026 season. So this was already updated. This is what I'm saying. Like usually it's like entering 2025. Like this is 26 season. 101 wins, entering 2026 season. Ivy League Coach of the Year, 2019. USILA Division I Coach of the Year, 2019. All the All-Americans, NCAA tournament appearances, the Ivy League championship. Like there was at least a sentence worth more that they could have done to like kind of mirror like Woj's thing about like, hey, by the way, he did do all this stuff while he was here.
Yeah,
and then right into like we're going to a nationwide search, and it's just like this, just a kind of cold like severance of fruitful and pretty long-lasting relationship. 16 years. It did ring a little cold.
Yeah, I mean, like, and this is where I think we maybe have the conversation about the decision and what we think of it. I'm just going to lay out some kind of background here. Tony Seaman is the most. It's either Tony Seaman or Mike Murphy. Tony Seaman coached 8 years at Penn. He was 74 and 37, so he won 67% of his games. He was 35 and 13. He won 73%, of his games in conference play. He won 4 Ivy League championships. He took them to the NCAA tournament in 6 of his 8 seasons, including a trip to the Final Four in 1988 when they lost to Syracuse and Gary Gate. I think that's the famous Air Gate game. So he got them to a Final Four. After that, it's from 91 to 2009. So it's 19 years, and there are 5 coaches in that 19-year span. That's a lot. That's a coach every 4 years, basically. Every graduating class, essentially. There's a new coach. Yeah. And the list of winning seasons in that time period is 2 in 19 years. Brian Volker had 1, and Matt Hogan had 1, and he was there for 1 year. Volker got them to 2 NCAA tournaments, which were there in 04 and 06. Those are the first 2 NCAA tournaments they had made since Tony Seaman was the coach there. So you got 2 winning seasons and 2 NCAA tournament trips in 19 years. I mean, if you look at I'll just go by their Ivy League finish by year. From 91 to 09. Tied for 3rd, 5th, tied for 5th, 6th, 7th, 7th, 4th, tied for 6th, 4th, 6th, tied for 3rd, 5th, T4, T3, 7, 3, T3, T4, 5. That's nowhere in there is a top 2 finish in the Ivy, let alone an Ivy League championship. This was a pretty moribund program before Mike Murphy got there. And we can, we often do the thing of, you see this with jobs where we talk around like all of the external things of like, hey, they're in a great location. Penn is certainly in a great location in Philly. Franklin Field's a very famous stadium. Though at this point also it's fair to mention it's old. It's you say if you've been to games at Franklin Field in February, I mean, it's pretty.
They don't make them like that anymore, Jake.
Yeah,
for good reason. But yeah, historic, cavernous, kind of dilapidated a little bit. But yeah,
Penn's an Ivy League school, so obviously that's going to attract recruits. Always there will be a certain attraction. Mike Murphy recruited very well at Penn. It should be mentioned. But you often say this, but you don't mention like the actual record. At some point, your record does say stuff about you. Penn historically, I would say. Now, that's not to say that things cannot change, and that's not to say that fans of a school or an athletic director or alums, stakeholders, whatever, are wrong for wanting more. Look, things can change. When Maryland let go of Dave Cottle and hired John Tillman, the refrain was, you're kind of like a quarterfinal school. It's pretty crazy to expect to hire a coach who's going to make the Final Four routinely. John Tillman did it. Now, listen, there's only one John Tillman out there. So, like, it goes both ways. I don't say this to say that the decision was wrong or that, like, hey, this is who you are. It's going to say, look, things can change. Jeff Tambroni at Penn State is a good example. So there are examples of this. That being said, I would say historically, Penn is probably fifth in the Ivy. I mean, Cornell and Princeton are the top dogs. Brown has had numerous coaches. Numerous coaches at Brown have made the Final Four. I think it's like 3. Lars did it. I think Starja might have done it too. But Browns, I mean, if we go Penn, they've made the NCAA tournament a total of 14 times. In the 16-team tournament era, there are 6 of those. You look at Brown, they've made the NCAA tournament 15 times, 2 Final Fours in 94 and 2016. Lars did it. Peter Lasagna did it in 94. And then they also had Starja, who didn't make a Final Four, but made the tournament quite a bit. I would probably put them behind Brown, maybe. And maybe they're right there. I think you have to put Yale ahead of them as well. Yale was in a similar situation before Shea took over, but what Shea's done has been and Yale did have a Final Four. They made the Final Four when John Reese was there in the 90s. But what Shea's done has been pretty, it speaks for itself. So I think they're probably 4 or 5 historically in the Ivy. Is I think probably where I would put them. Now, as we've seen, the Ivy's different now than it's been in the past. There's more, resources being invested, facilities, obviously talent. Ivy League schools continue to recruit very well. So I do think that's worth pointing out. Again, that's not to say that if you look at Mike Murphy's standard, this is what I gave you. So before 19 years, 2 tournaments, 2 winning seasons. Mike Murphy had 9 winning seasons in, let's call it 14 years, because 2020 season got cut short and 21 they didn't play. So 16 seasons is kind of 14 really. 9 winning seasons in 14 years. They made 4 NCAA tournaments. They made 2 quarterfinals. They were pretty darn close to the Final Four in those 2 years. They didn't get there. It's fair, but 2022, they lost a tight 4th quarter game to Rutgers where they had the lead at one point. And then we all remember 2019, the infamous crazy game at the Rent against Yale. 3 Ivy League championships, 4 Ivy League championships. They won 3 Ivy League tournament titles, 2014, 2019, 2022. And then 2019, they swept it all. They went 6-0. Go ahead, Steve.
Just to be unfair. But how much do you think making an NCAA tournament 3 out of the 4 times that he did it in his term due to the conference tournament kind of weighed into that? Like,
I don't, because I think they were an NCAA tournament team either way those years.
2019 for sure.
Like 2014, they were a top 5 seed, I think. Now that one was, if you're actually going to pick like this year obviously is probably the low point of his tenure. I think if you go back and look at other losing to Drexel at home in that 2014 year at Franklin Field, that was a really good Penn team, and they got blown out by Drexel. And Volker.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you're looking at other kind of maybe low points of his tenure, that one kind of sticks out. But nonetheless, 2014, that team was a top 4 seed, so I think they were getting in the tournament without the AQ. 2019, obviously. In 2022, that was the year the Ivy got 6 in, and they were what?
Fourth.
They were gonna get in that year. The Ivy, they got seeded 3 that year. I think they probably were going to be a seed even if they didn't win the AQ. So yeah, I think the years he won it tended to be years where they were very good. They had very few kind of unexpected kind of seasons. The only one you could say would be 2011 when they were 8-7. That was the thing for all of Mike Murphy was known. One of the main things he was known for was he was probably the master of the scheduling in the RPI game. He probably played it better than anybody. There were countless Mike Murphy teams that were 8-7 or 7-6 or 9-7 that were always right on the mix of the tournament because their numbers metrically were superb. However, they really never made the tournament in those years. It usually got them to being like the last team out. So that was one thing. Like for all of it got his teams in the conversation a little bit more. But usually when they made the tournament, they merited it. Like they were very, very good. I mean, that's the thing. 3 out of 4 years they made the tournament, they were a top 4 seed in the 3 or 4 years they made it. So when he had some good teams, they usually did a good bit with it. Now, again, they didn't make a Final Four. So
that was the other part. Like, how much does this not? If he made that Final Four, does this happen?
So that's a good question. So we got our good pal Mark Hart asked this question to us. He said the last 5 full seasons Mike Murphy had at Penn, they were a 2019 they were a 3 seed and they lost in the quarterfinals. Or no, they were the 4. Yeah, they were the 4. They should not have been the 4 that year. They should have been seeded above Virginia or Duke, and maybe they make the Final Four. Irrelevant to this conversation, but I just think it's worth noting. It was an all-time bad NCAA decision that Yale and Penn played each other in the quarterfinals that year when they'd already played each other twice, and Penn had beat them twice. So 2019, 4 seed quarterfinal loss. 2022, 3 seed quarterfinal loss. 2023, 7-6. Mark says he had on the second team out. 2024, 9-6. First team out. This year, pretty bad. I would say concerningly bad. I mean, I'll say this. Like, we talked about a little bit whether he might be in trouble this year on like in the DMs and things like that. And my view was that he would get another season. But Penn went from, and we didn't have, we did the underachieving, team thing. Man, Penn was ranked 13th preseason. I thought Penn was going to make the tournament this year. I was kind of buying stock in Penn. They had Emmett Carroll in goal, Brendan Lavelle, 2 All-Americans. Went 4-10 this year, and they lost their last 7 games. At times, I think you could say kind of lifeless a little bit. But I mean, like, if you look at some of these games, the Notre Dame game, they could have won that game late in the year. They lost to Princeton by 4. So they weren't getting blown out, really. It's like the team still seemed kind of bought in, but the team was bad. I mean, look, 4 wins is bad. And it is worth noting Mike Murphy seemed really confident in this team preseason. USA Lacrosse Magazine did a piece on them before the year where he talked about how he thought his teams are always usually built on a lot on the defensive side, and they were more methodical. They kind of zagged in the Ivy League compared to everyone else. Well, everyone else in the Ivy usually was, we talked about all offense, all gas, no breaks. His teams were usually a little more of a curveball in there. They played a lot slower. They had some great defenses. Not always. 2019, they had a super explosive offense with Sam Hanley and Simon Mathias at attack. But he kind of mentioned that he felt like, you need an offense really now to win. It's not the way it used to be, and I think we've got the offense that can do that. Didn't really materialize. It was a bad year. So Mark mentions these are their last 5 full seasons, and he asks, if this recent run is worthy of being fired, my question is, what are the expectations at Penn, and are those expectations at all realistic? I'll let you go, but I'll say this first, and I'll expand on it after you go. I don't think this was a decision made on the last 5 years. I think this is a decision made on the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Is how I view the firing. Go ahead.
No, it's 100%. I don't think it's like looking back and being dissatisfied with what he's done at Penn, but just looking forward and like, can we keep up? Because it does, if you're kind of looking at this year, there were, 6 in the Ivy, 1 and 5 in the conference. And if you're looking at what, above them, Cornell just won the title. So, they're doing fine. Princeton didn't make the Final Four, but, made the tournament every year under Madeline, has the Final Four under them. Harvard definitely looks like on the come up. Byrne seems to have at least the offense cooking up there. And if they could just play a little bit better defense, maybe they're a quarterfinal team this year. And they also made the tournament, back in 2022.
Or if you can get them a face-off guy.
That's it. I'm working on it, Coach. Yale, disappointing season, probably kind of disappointing-ish seasons for kind of a very proud program. But, maybe, I just kind of think with the Petro thing, it's like at the end of the day, like if you're at your weakest moment, things that may not have happened, 1 or 2 seasons prior can suddenly happen very quickly. I'm not predicting anything with Yale, but I'm just saying, like, if somebody's looking, again, the same thing that we're doing with Penn here, like, hey, maybe the last 4 years weren't the best, or like they didn't like exceed expectations, and like, do we think this person's going to be able to keep up with the teams going forward? And it's kind of, but Yale side. Well,
I think Yale's definitely. I think Yale's different. I mean, like Andy Shea built the modern Yale program, but look, Don Starcher got fired 5 years after he won a national title.
That's it.
Like nothing is necessarily out of the realm. Again, that's Virginia and Hopkins and Syracuse, and like that's a little different. But there tends to. But look, that's what I would have said about Penn. Like if you asked me 3 months ago, I would have said, if this was at Virginia, yeah, maybe he gets let go. I don't think Penn is going to do that. I was wrong. So Penn proved to be a little more authoritative, quick on the trigger than I thought they'd be.
So, yeah, him at his nadir of at least recently, like, I'm not saying that obviously both of us didn't expect this to happen, but yeah, if you're at your weakest, and there are kind of like maybe have some discussions that you're not privy to, to Mark's direct point, what are the expectations at Penn, and are those expectations at all realistic? I legitimately think like Penn, there's no reason to not be a top 4 team in the Ivy every year. And with that gives you almost a 50% chance. I mean, and it is my case.
No, I don't think you're. I'm sorry. I don't want to cut you off. I don't think you're wrong about that. I don't think you're wrong about that. What I would say is, I don't think they fired the guy because Mike Murphy had them in the top 4 in the Ivy like every year. I think the view is a little higher than that at this point.
Exactly. But like a bare minimum, always making the Ivy League tournament and being in the NCAA tournament at least 3 out of 4 years. I don't think is like an outsized. Like this is what Penn, kind of like Maryland. This is why I'm thinking of Maryland. And I was like, it's not Maryland, obviously, in terms of like the hotbedness of lacrosse. But Philly is a huge like epicenter of lacrosse talent. And it also, it's like a magnet for the entire greater Philly area, crossing into Jersey, and a good part of Northern Maryland. Because I started around whenever I was in Philly, like on Sundays, I always saw like gravy jerseys everywhere. There's so much like crossover with Maryland. And I'm saying like has a greater reach, like soft power, for lack of a better term here, for the greater area. And like, if you add all that greater area, that kind of probably is more space than what Maryland covers, the University of Maryland. And I think they're looking like, hey, Penn State is making Final Fours. Like, and it's just like, not that every kid would rather go to Penn instead of Penn State, because Penn State has its own allure, especially for people near Habitat. But it's just like, people who like love the Eagles and stuff like that, people like love Philly, like, it Penn's just like, we should be able to attract this type of like of elite talent to Penn, because these kids already want to go to Philly, for the link. It's part of being in Philly for PA lacrosse players that I think is just like, hey, we should be owning that. If not owning it, but it's getting our share.
All right, so I think I'll posit this question to you. I think that might be what Penn is thinking. Here's what I'll say. I believe that if you asked me about the Philly recruiting question 15 years ago, I would say Penn should kind of control that area. Now I'm going to say you brought up exactly what I was thinking. Penn State's a different beast than it's ever been, and Penn State is dominating Pennsylvania recruiting, but also Philly more than they ever have. We talk go look at Penn State's roster. There are more, and listen, now Penn did go. Look, Mike Murphy was the coach at Haverford. It's like that was kind of part that was part of their idea when they made this move, and when they brought him in. He'd been a Penn assistant before. He'd been at Haverford, so that was certainly part of it. But you go look at Penn State's roster, and this it is pretty littered. I mean, Matt Traynor from Downingtown, PA, Kyle Lehman from Pennsylvania, Will Peden from Pennsylvania, Ryan Duraco's a Haverford guy, Brendan Leary from Pennsylvania, Will Costner from Pennsylvania. I mean, I can go on and there's Grant Ament and all those before that. I'll go with Penn's roster, and it's worth noting this: Penn does not recruit poorly by any means. This recruiting class coming up, they have Jackson Marr from the Beulah School in Maryland, who is a top 10-ish recruit. They had another top Quinn Ball, another top 50 recruit in their face-off guy. Even in years past, like Griffin Skane was a pretty big-time recruit. Leo Hoffman, pretty big-time recruit. He was a 5-star guy from a couple years ago. Look, Sam Hanley they brought in. So Penn has recruited pretty well under Mike Murphy. But if you look at the roster, one thing that you could say it is maybe doesn't have a lot of is Pennsylvania kids.
So there's one kid from the Haverford,
There's 9 Pennsylvania kids on Penn's roster.
Like the MIAA, the Inter Academic League is the elite Philly high school. So, one kid from Haverford School, but the other ones, again, you don't have to be from here, but it's just it feels like Penn should be not owning this area, but it's just getting their share of kids from these schools that are going to.
But here's what I'll ask: you made the Maryland point, or like this, as an Ivy League school, the type of kid you get is going to be much different. Are the kids in Philly, are these kind of kids have for these places, are those the kids who are more likely to go to Penn, or those kids who are more likely to go to Penn State? Because I look at you look at the MIAA, and Maryland has some success in there, but those are kids who generally have been a little bit more likely to go to Virginia or North Carolina, or back in the day when Petro was there, he owned it. It's a different story now. Maryland, it's again, they recruit their share for sure, but Maryland doesn't own the MIAA the way you maybe think would it's in Maryland, those kids want to go to Maryland. Maryland's a different, Maryland's offering a different thing. They're not maybe looked at education academics wise as an Ivy or as Virginia or North Carolina or Duke are. And if you look at Maryland's roster, Daniel Kelly's one of those kids from the MIA. Zach Whittier's from Maryland. AJ Larkins from Baltimore. They have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, There's 22 Maryland. There's 22 Maryland kids on Maryland's roster, but a lot of those I would say are like guys who maybe Maryland takes a lot of kids like guys who are lower on the depth chart. Maryland takes a lot of Maryland kids. If you look at the top of the depth chart, it's not a Maryland-dominated roster. I think it's Maryland recruits nationally much more than they did 10, 15 years ago. And so I think that's kind of my point is Penn still recruits pretty darn well for where they're at. But when you look at the type of kid, like this, how many kids does Princeton have necessarily from New Jersey? I'll look at the roster right now. It's not a ton. I think we're kind of I think similar numbers how many Penn has from Pennsylvania. The Ivy schools I think are just different. I mean, you're recruiting a different caliber, and you're recruiting again, like recruiting well. Like they recruit well, Harvard recruits well. So I just kind of wonder about. I don't know if that's in their process of thinking of like we should do better in here, but my reply to that would be one, I don't know if you really can because I just don't know if the kids that I think if Penn State wasn't Penn State, I would say yes. I think they could probably do better. But I think now, like, if you're a kid from there, I think you want to go to Penn State. And I also would just say, I think maybe more of the issue you're looking at is, are we getting enough out of the recruits that we are bringing in? And maybe that is more the issue they're having is, well, hey, like we are bringing in pretty darn good recruiting classes. Are we getting the results out of it that we should?
Absolutely.
Maybe that's more of the kind of thing.
That's a great point, for sure. The only counter to the first one about like, can Penn get those interacademic kids that Penn State's getting? Do they want that? I think it's for sure. I'm not saying like flip it and just like them getting 8-20 of those recruits, but you got to be able to get 25-35% because like right now is still a time where parents who are honestly, the kind of driving force of recruiting.
Oh, I agree.
There's still a degree of like want to get into certain of these schools. And especially the lacrosse to finance pipeline that is, self-evident in the sport. Like with Wharton and there's like the maybe you can't do it with the grad school thing, like, but like there seems to be like, hey, we have an attractive thing. And I was like, I think there's a lot of kids who do want to go to school in a city school. And it's like, I love Princeton, obviously. Yale's cool as hell. Harvard, shout out to them. But they're probably a little bit more like Penn. Like, you're in a city. If you want like city life to kind of enjoy that and like kind of be in the Eastern Corridor and stuff like that, like you got a lot of that stuff in Penn. And I think, yeah, you're right. It's like, are we getting our share of this absolute wealth of talent that's like right in the city? That's the one thing I was like a little bit different with Maryland. Like College Park, I'm sure it's surrounded by like elite prep schools where parents are paying $70,000. I'm sure of it. But there's like, it's not like kind of like Hopkins, right? Forgive me, you may tell me if you don't know what the hell you're talking about. But it's like it feels like a good more amount of those schools are around the Baltimore area. Like, and I know that.
Yes.
College Park too.
Yes, they're like, I mean, probably 20 within 30 minutes. Well, not all of them, but like Boys Latin, Calvert Hall, Gilman. I feel like I'm missing one, but those three are all like spitting distance to Homewood and Loyola for that matter.
So
there's others that are more closer to DC and then closer to Calvert.
Yeah, for sure. Georgetown Prep, right? Like that's what I said. Like, I just thought like Penn kind of playing that Hopkins role with like a ton of like prep schools that were really good lacrosse players. Are like they play their championship game at Franklin Field. Like, so there's just a natural affinity for Philly, and it's just like if we should get our share. And it's just like, and also getting some of these kids who maybe. That's why I joked around. Like my advice to Harvard, it's like get the kids, or like if you're going to be a head coach at Ivy League school, get the kids who like, yeah, you help them get in. Yeah, they're really good and stuff like that. Like, they're going to work for you. It's like maybe the borderline kids, like academic. I'm not saying like, break whatever admission required, but it's just like, I'm sure there's a ton of kids. I know there are because they've been like bragged about how many kids they reject every year. There are a ton of kids who like remind me think like I could get into Penn. Like that's all it really is. If you can get the admissions on board with your vision and get enough of your dudes in that you want, and I'm not saying that Murphy didn't, but I'm just saying like change your targets and get the kids that you want. Like, and yeah, that's why I think realistically, yes, but that's why it's like making the Ivy League tournament is bare minimum. It's like you shouldn't really be patted on the back for that. Like Penn should expect to be in the Ivy League tournament, and I think 52 out of 4 years they should expect to be in the NCAA tournament. If not, I think 60%. Yeah.
So I hear your point. I'm not sure that they are. I don't think they're lacking for getting recruits in necessarily. I mean, I'm just looking. 2023, they had. That was the year Princeton had the number 1 ranked recruiting class. Princeton had 12 kids that were either a 5 or a 4-star. Penn had 10 that year. I mean, they had a top 10 recruiting class per IL just recently 2 years ago. This year, I think they're 15th. In 2022, they weren't in the top 10, but they still brought in some pretty big names that year as well. I just think your point about like 2021 they were ranked 9th. So like I hear your argument. I think that like they are getting those kids. I think the kids who want an Ivy League education and whose parents like want the label of going to an Ivy League school and the money and everything like that, I think they get those kids. I think they're getting those kids already is kind of how I see it. I don't know that I think that was one of the things that did Wojcik in at the end with Harvard. It was like, hey, like these recruiting classes every year are pretty darn great, at least as far as the rankings go and things like that. Where are the results to match it? I never got the feeling that like Harvard has always recruited. John Tillman recruited very good at Harvard. Chris Wojcik did too. Jerry Byrne is now. I don't know that that's lacking at Penn. I think that they're getting those. I think they're getting the kids they want to get. And listen, maybe there's more kids that they could get that they're not because of admissions. It's possible. I'm not, plugged in there for certain. So I just think they're getting. I don't think recruiting is the problem here. And as to go with your point about 2 at every 4 years. I mean, he did it pretty much. He did 2 out of 5. 2 of the last 5, though granted 3 of the last. I just think, yeah. I mean, let's look at it. 2010 to 2013, they made 1 of 4. 2011 to 2014. I think the first 9 years of his tenure with 2 NCAA tournament appearances, I think you could maybe poke. Was that recently? 2019, 2022, 2014. I think in theory, 2 out of 4 seems nice. I guess my point would be, if I'm going to counterpoint that, how many teams does the Ivy League get on a yearly basis? 2, 3. I mean, taking out the year they got 6, it's usually 2 or 3. If Cornell and Princeton are what they're doing right now, you're kind of fighting over one. You're fighting over one spot, basically. And I just think, man, there's a lot of programs out there who I think would say it's just hard. I mean, go look at the list of schools who have – we did this. The list of schools who make the tournament every year. It's Maryland who's made it for 20-something years. Georgetown's done it 7 years in a row, I think. Princeton's done it 4. And that's it. If Notre Dame, if you want to count 22 and you want to throw them in there for that, okay, they got to run it kind of like Maryland. But other than that, man, like Cornell missed the tournament last year and they won the national championship. Virginia missed the tournament this year after how many? Duke missed the tournament a couple years ago. It's hard to make the tournament, man. Like 2 out of 4 years, I think sounds on paper. I think it sounds good, but then I'm like, well, then there's a lot of other teams who also think we should make the tournament 2 out of every 4 years. And, like it's just a lot of schools in that mix. Like we talked about it, how hard it is to go from that every other year kind of zone, territory to, I mean, North Carolina can't make the tournament, every year. Like, it's hard, man. So I don't know. 2 out of 4. I don't think it sounds crazy, but that's hard. Like, that's basically in a 10-year tenure. That's 5 or 6 tournaments, at 10 years. It's just no one's done that at Penn, except for Tony Seaman. That was back in the 80s. Like, and that's not to say I don't think anyone can do it. That's tricky. That's, again, I guess my point to that would be, all right, well, whose spot are they taking at the table to do that? Are they going to knock Cornell or Princeton off the top?
So I was looking at something where you're making such a good point. No, maybe it's like, but then it's just like, if you don't have at least reasonable but slightly high expectations, then it's like 1 out of 4 years. Then
yeah, I don't. That's fair.
Then you don't fire Woke.
Yeah,
don't fire Murphy then.
Yeah, no, you're right. I guess that's Mark's point. Do I think Penn's expectations are realistic? I don't know. I guess is my question to that. I think you get the right coach in there, and maybe they can brush shoulders with Cornell and Princeton. I think I guess my view is, if I'm going to put myself on the side of supporting the move, what I would say is, again, the idea of like the next 5 years rather than the previous 5 years. Maybe it's this view that I think it's totally reasonable to take the opinion that Murphy had maxed out, that he had gotten he'd squeezed as much out of the lemon he was going to squeeze. Like, he had gotten what he could. And the view is that if Cornell and Princeton are where they're at, and those guys look, I mean, listen, I think with those two coaches those schools have, how young they are, the success they've already had, I think you could look at like a decade of Cornell and Princeton competing for Final Fours. I mean, Connor Busick is 30-something years old, and he just won a national championship. And he's at his alma mater. Like, dude, this thing could go on for a while. Matt Madeline is early 40s, I guess. And he recruits like a maniac, and he's made a Final Four already, and was a goal away. And as we just mentioned, he's got 4 straight NCAA tournaments. I mean, he's got consistency built up that not a lot of programs have. We'll see if Andy Shea can get Yale back on the horse there. Jerry Byrne. Let's see if he can kind of get going to Harvard. I guess maybe that's the view is, all right, you got Cornell going, you got Princeton going, Yale's still in there, Harvard looks like they're ascending, and we're going backwards. Yeah. Maybe we're not. Maybe it's not 2 out every 4 years. Maybe they weren't looking at that lens, but if we don't get better here, it's going to go from being, I don't know, 1 out of every 4 years to like 0 out of 4 years, and we're going to fall off. And if from that perspective, I can see the rationale in making the move. I can see it.
So before we were doing that, I did, because I was thinking about like why they're not getting these kids, and I look at Grant and Met, right? So 2015 Power 100, the 5 kids from Haverford. Sapinski went to Hopkins, 4th ranked. Noah Ledgman, defenseman, went to Haverford, and Penn got nailed him. And Grant, at the 31st ranked, went to Penn State. Now I'm trying to find some articles, maybe something so like Grant was like, I forget the pod. Shout out to a friend of the pod. Like, if he was like always wanted to go to Penn State, there's no chance out of it. But that's my thing. It's just like, you nail one of them. One of those kids from that area of that kind of elite level. Like, maybe change this thing again. Who knows what happens if Grant's at Penn or not? He probably maybe doesn't reach his success, but it's just like just part of me is just like, yeah, I think maybe the recruiting can just get refocused and with the right guy and do more when you're because if you're 100%, it doesn't matter. You get number one recruit every year if you're not developing them and they're not getting better and you're doing nothing. But yeah, it's just like I do think it's reasonable for be like we should feel like we're ascending. And if it's not every year getting into a tournament, 40% of the time. Let's get the baby.
Yeah, no, yeah, I see that. Again, I think there's arguments to. I see it both ways. I think if you want to make a move, I can see the argument. I think on the other hand, I can see those who are like, okay, we want to make the tournament 50% of the time. Hey, man, no one's ever really done that. And like that's institutional. No, go ahead.
Can I just one last thing? It was like because you made a great point. It's just like I would just like kind of like felt right had to log into it. It was like everybody wants to make the tournament every year,
yeah.
Right? And it's just like what is one thing? And you're 100% right, and I shouldn't like literally ignore that. What's one thing though that's in the way for teams to make the tournament? And like until recently, that Richmond also had kind of that difficulty, and they're going to play games and make you guess, but it's being able to schedule those teams that want to come to your area. And something with Penn is just like I think will help with Richmond. You're in the hotbed. You're in a place where people want to recruit. You're in a place where people want to play, so that recruits' families can see them play live. Like there's an abundance of natural resources at Penn that really like it could help. Again, I'm not saying they're going to shoot up and like compete with Cornell and Princeton for the Ivy League title, but it's just like, yeah, it does also. I know what you're saying, and you're 100% right. Let's do more with what we got, and we got a lot of good stuff here. Let's turn it out. Let's get the max out of them 100%, and hopefully the next. But there's also, I think, like, are we getting everything we can from the area, and using our area to attract? It's like that's the other thing. I just maybe I'm just too close to it. Being from South Jersey, loving Philly like that.
No, I think your view is I think you have maybe it's an optimistic view, I guess, or maybe you're looking at the resources side, and I think there's kind of when you have a coaching search like this, you look at it from two different ways. It's like the resource and and maybe the tangible things, and I think in that perspective, it's fair. I don't think you're wrong. I guess maybe I'm looking at it more from the intangible and just the like results improving. Like, hey, listen. I think if you looked at natural resources, like as far as a job, I think you can make the argument that Cornell is 4th in the Ivy, maybe 5th. Academically, it's, I think, not quite like Harvard, Yale in that kind of zone. It maybe doesn't have the access to talent that Penn has. But what does Cornell have? And we talk about this a lot on this pod the last, month or so. It's institutional lacrosse, like it's in the walls there.
Yeah, I mean, like will.
Yeah, like, and not even just institutional will, I wouldn't say, because listen, Cornell hasn't hired an external coach. Was Petro the only one they ever did? Or was he an assistant? I think he might be the only one they ever did. Outside of like within the Petro was, I think, an assistant at Hopkins, and then Cornell they hired him. After that, though, Tams took over for Petro. Tams was an assistant. DeLuca took over for Tams. DeLuca was an assistant. Kerwick took over for DeLuca. He was an assistant. Milliman, on and on. Like, Cornell doesn't hire external. They do not do it. No matter how many times, like, I wonder what they're going to do here. They could maybe go this. They're like, nope. And no matter what, they just keep on winning. Like, they take approach like we're not. If you look at probably combined salaries, they might have they probably are pretty low to the bottom of the Ivy, comparatively, I would assume. They have a very young coaching staff. Again, like they go next man up. And I don't think Cornell's put it in the money Yale has, for instance, but there's just not a substitute for lacrosse matters here. And it matters we have so many stakeholders. And I'm not saying lacrosse doesn't matter at Penn. I think this is a sign that, yeah, they probably want it to really matter. I think it's different at Cornell. And so I think that's kind of like what is the reason Cornell has been where they are and Penn has been where they are, or Brown or whatever. There's just an intangible quality there that they have. And Princeton, Princeton is one of the 3 or 4 examples I can think of. One coach just materially changed literally everything about that school. Like Bill Tierney came in and he just changed it all. And that's kind of where I look at how many, if we're looking at what Penn can do here. And again, this isn't me saying that they shouldn't make a change, because again, I think you could make an argument that with the way Ivy's going, we were going backwards and we don't want to fall into being 5th, 6th, 7th. That, yeah, what Mike Murphy has done has been very good, but we think that time has passed and we want a coach who can continue what he did 5 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago. But if you're looking at meaningfully changing Penn's standing, like getting them year in, year out to the top 1 or 2 of the Ivy, I guess this is kind of where I pause. Like, I can only think of very few coaches who've actually done that at a school. Like, meaningfully taken from one tier to another. John Tillman did it at Maryland. He took Maryland from one spot to another. Like, just meaningfully moved Maryland up the ladder. I think that Tams did it at Penn State. He moved Penn State up the ladder. Bill Tierney did it at Princeton. Other than that, I think you could say Dino did it at Duke. Kevin Corrigan did it at Notre Dame, but that's a little different because he's like the only coach I've ever had. And I guess my point to that would be those guys are really hard to come by. Like those guys I mentioned, Tillman, Dino, Tierney, even Tams. Tams, I think, is a top 5 coach right now. Like, it's really hard to find one of those coaches who just meaningfully changes your station. Like moves you into a different neighborhood. Those guys like move their school into a different neighborhood. And that's really hard. And so I guess if Penn is looking for a coach who can get them to where Mike Murphy had them for most of the 2010s and 2022 as well, I think they can find that. I think Penn can find a coach who can do what Mike Murphy did, and maybe even a little better. Maybe they can find a coach who turns one of those quarterfinals into a Final Four. If Penn is looking for a coach who is going to get them to do what Andy Shea did at Yale in the late 2010s, or what it looks like Cornell and Princeton are poised to do, I feel like that's a lot harder. I think that's much less likely to happen, is how I would look at it.
I mean, good time as ever to start thinking about who could be that man.
Yeah. All right. Let's shift the view here to obviously Kansas. Here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to throw it over to Safe first. Don't want to hog the mic too much. I want to give Safe thoughts. I'm going to clear out the lane for him, give his thoughts. We're gonna separate this into a couple categories because the last part we kind of touched on it was the timing. Penn last played a game April 26th, which is as of probably when you're going to be listening to this pod 2 months ago, and they just made the move today or yesterday. Recruiting is in full swing. So and maybe we're wrong. It's entitled. Maybe they can get maybe they get the same kind of loot possible options of candidates, but the timeline does kind of set whoever the next hire is back. I think at least for also again worth noting, you brought this up. Ivy League, you can't bring any transfers. So it's not like you can kind of get it. You can't fill in the roster immediately overnight. You can't make an overnight. It's got to be done through the high school recruiting process at an Ivy League school. And that has been set back by this year. So I think it's fair to say, like, if they're going to attract the same level of candidate that maybe they would have 2 months ago, I feel like a long contract might be what's, maybe 6 years, somewhere in that range, more than a 4 or 5 year, maybe 7-year deal. But it feels like the timeline might hurt them a bit. So, but again, maybe we're wrong. So we're going to split this up into two different we're going to do two things. One, we're going to look at possible candidates. And two, we're going to bet on, or we're going to look at who they're probably going to target and who's attainable. And we're splitting this up in kind of two different brackets. First is who would have been the candidates in a normal timeline. Let's say they let go of Mike Murphy the first week of May or the week of the NCAA tournament starting, something like that, at the end of the regular season. And they have a whole month before, kind of recruiting gets in full swing to get a coach in, get assistants in, things like that. Who would be the candidates that would make sense in that timeline? Then, who are the candidates in this timeline where, hey, if you're going to leave your school, you're a coach who's currently recruiting right now, guys, and you're going to go to a place where you're going to be a little set back in recruiting. You got to fill out got to expedite the timeline of getting assistants in, things like that. So, Saif, I will throw it to you. If Penn is doing this search 2 months ago, who do you think they are looking at?
So I'm going to add names so that you can, so I don't spoil your names, which is great.
Okay.
The only ones I would add, Money Mitch.
Good one.
And Chris Fifes.
Okay.
And Andrew Baxter. And I'll tell you why about Baxter in particular. Just because I think, as experience with the Ivy, part of, success, definitely got everybody's attention with Fairfield. Kind of strike while the iron is hot. You're going to need, again, back then, kind of obviously disappointing end for Fairfield season, not making the NCAA tournament, but height of, hey, now we're back, Fairfield, just because, there wasn't too much to get back to. But, an emerging season, got people's attention in and out of the top 20. I could see him maybe thinking, hey, I'll get back to the Ivy at a head coaching level. It would be a kind of a reasonable person to think of. Fifes, I just think he's a really good coach. Shout out to Adam. I know he's waiting for the North Carolina job. But just another person who's just a good coach, gotten into NCAA tournament multiple times. Strong in terms of program you don't ever really hear anything bad about. Vermont on and off the field, this, and somebody who's just a recognizable name that if this was a more normal separation, that they can then be Penn and Coach Murphy just walk their own ways is a good place to be. This, being in the middle of the season, middle of the off season kind of changes how coaches are probably viewing the school also. Yeah. But those are only my three that I had in my head. I was okay at the time of the end of the season, still NCAA tournament time, doing a normal coaching search that would be open to leaving their current programs.
All right, I will. And listen, we should clarify that, caveat this. This is not. Some of this is. I should have done this at the start, but I'm doing it now. One, this is not saying that any of these coaches have interest in leaving this job. I'm not reporting that any of these coaches are definitely interested in leaving this job. I remember when Chris did this with the Syracuse thing a couple years ago, and it became a whole thing.
A list with the Petro thing. Michigan.
That's a throwback.
One of our best moments.
I'm not saying that these guys are looking to leave their school. What I'm saying is, if I'm putting myself in Penn's shoes, these are people I'm going to look at. They could have no interest at all, but this is just who I'm looking at. And look, in some of these cases, it might be assistants who, hey, maybe they want to become a head coach. Penn is a good job. I feel like we should definitely set the everything I've said, maybe I've come in from the more negative point of view, save some more positive point of view. This is still probably a top 20 job in the country. This is a really good job. It should definitely be noted. Go ahead.
Only person I myself forget, and then maybe it'd be hard to pull off, but at least a name. No, I'm going to save it for current timeline. I think it's better, more for current timeline. Okay, I'm good with what I have. Normal timeline.
So
Bice, Money Mitch, and my man Baxter.
I like those. I like those a lot. Baxter was one I hadn't thought of, but I like that. All right. So in a normal timeline, if Penn's everything their way, here's who I think are a reasonable list of pretty attainable, or I should clarify that. It's reasonable to think maybe they'd be interested. Listen, Penn could call John Tillman, but or they could call Lars. But this is just a list of, I think, names who in a normal time, I think, could maybe have a decent crack of being the next Penn head coach. All right. Taylor Ray. He is right down the road. He does obviously knows Philly very well. Done a very good job at St. Joe's. I think there's reason to suspect that Taylor Ray would maybe not be a great fit at Penn. You think of some of the guys he brings in at St. Joe's. The recruiting for Taylor Ray from St. Joe's to Penn will be much different. There's a big universe there in terms of the type of people he would be recruiting. He recruits a lot of Canadians. So it's a totally different ball game, St. Joe's to Penn. Doesn't mean he wouldn't be he wouldn't do good there. I think Taylor Ray's an excellent lacrosse coach. But look, he's local. He's done a very good job. St. Joe's has a top 20 team. I mean, pretty much almost every year of the last 4 or 5 years. Jesse Bernhardt. It feels like he's more than earned a look at a good coaching, a head coaching job. He's basically John Tillman's right-hand man at this point. Maryland's defenses are elite year in and year out. He seems to be pretty selective or picky. I mean, he hasn't taken a head coaching job yet. I mean, he's been with Tills for almost 10 years now. There's not many people. I think he's Tills' longest tenured assistant. And that obviously, I think he's pretty well compensated at Maryland. That's kind of come up. You've seen a lot of assistants kind of leaving the profession this summer. And you wonder if pay is a big. I think Jesse Bernhardt makes out pretty decently at Maryland. He's also still playing in the PLL. But if you're looking for look, this is what Dartmouth did with Sean Kerwin. And they went for who's the best out there. They got it. If you're looking for who's the best assistant out there, I think it's Jesse Bernhardt. So, and if he was going to leave, this is a pretty darn good job. I mean, you don't often get better than these. There's better jobs than Penn, but they don't open up, every day. Ryan Wellner at Notre Dame, pretty similar line of thinking with Bernhardt. Ryan Wellner's been in the mix for some jobs in the past couple of years. He's done an amazing job with Notre Dame's defense, 2-time national champion, same as Bernhardt won 1 time with Maryland. But I guess I agree. Is he maybe in line at Notre Dame? Wade out Corrigan. We'll see. So, but he's recruited. He was at Navy for a long time. So, military academy to Ivy League, different admissions deal, but accustomed to working in a different sort of admissions process than the regular D1 program. Chris Wojcik, former Ivy League head coach, so obviously has plenty of experience there. He's done a very good job with Notre Dame's offense the past couple of years. They've had top 5 offenses. I think he would be someone who'd probably be maybe on a list. Ryan Poley, done a tremendous job at BU. Putting them, we talk about teams in the top 20 every year. BU's in the top 20 every year. Made the NCAA tournament. Consistency. Again, it's different going from a BU to a Ivy League school, but I think you could maybe look at him. Another name on here. Again, this is normal timeline. I don't think this is reasonable now. But I think it's worth noting because he was someone who was approached by Alana Wren when she was at Hopkins. is Joe Alberici. She was someone who they talked to. He didn't make the move. If you turn down Hopkins, I think it's probably fair to say you're probably not leaving for another job, but you never know. I think that he might be someone who gets contacted by Penn. Again, this goes to why it's interesting to kind of think of names, that could be involved here. Is the AD who did this just, within the last 5 years. That's my list in a normal kind of timeline. Safe, any thoughts?
I agree with the Wellner Woj point about like why not just wait it out at Notre Dame as well, like you're doing. Well, riding high, obviously disappointing end to the season on the potential of like, an absolute historic season, but it's just like things are going well. Corrigan, obviously trust them, like seems like a potential like elevation once he decides to step down. Might as well ride it out. It's kind of a bad situation that Notre Dame and they're below 500 a couple of seasons in a row. Maybe let's take the opportunity, cash in our chips to past success and get out. But they're still near the zenith of across landscape in terms of like premier team and performance. So while I think it's a good point, worthy maybe at the time, but probably the insane. Ray, I kind of see what you're saying in terms of like limitations of him coming there in terms of like what he's able to do at St. Joe's, able maybe to replicate that at Penn. But I think at the time, I think you could make a real run at Foley in May after they, what they did in the Patriot League. And I think a Patriot League coach with the string of success like Foley's had should be able to translate that into similar success at an Ivy school, just because Patriot League academic, considerations in terms of like what recruits are getting, he'd be somewhat used to that. Obviously different at Penn, but like it's something that was in his vocabulary, in the wheelhouse of like kind of being able to like talk to those type of people recruits group. But no, I like your list. The only other one, maybe, I don't know, at the time is Brecht. Just because I know maybe conventional thinking is a drop down from the big to the Ivy, but
I think so,
Ivy's closing a gap between them, the ACC and the Ivy and the big. It's kind of almost a triumvirate. It's not there yet. And it's just like it's kind of in that New York, Philly metro area, maybe a little bit different in terms of the kind of guys who, but I think you could come in with the heft of like, I had a more abound program that I turned around. Yes, with the transfers helped a lot, which is, probably a hand behind his back, but it's also at a school that, maybe attracts kind of kids that maybe he couldn't attract right off the bat at Rutgers. And he's got the Final Four under his belt, the quarterfinal run, and stuff that's still within recent memory. This is someone else. It's someone else that's at the time, I think it'd be worth talking to, and maybe he'd be open to hearing it, just because what
I could
they
see them.
They lost their athletic director, right? Hobbs, who was like kind of big into lacrosse. Maybe the new person is.
I could have seen them making a run at him a couple months ago. I don't think he'd be interested. I think he's at a Big Ten school. Those are pretty, those are good jobs. I think he's gonna have. Also, I think he's gonna have a really good team next year. So, I think, maybe they make a run at him. I wouldn't rule that out, but
I think some big ACC guy at the time, whoever the school is, I think that would help, like, because reverse the trend. Everywhere leaving the Ivy for these conferences.
Be a big pull. So current timeline is here. We'll do this, and I should again. The other point I want to caveat with this is, let's call it informed speculation. This is not. We know for a fact Penn is going to target these people. We know for a fact these people are going to interview. We know for a fact that you're interested. But it is talking with some sources, people. It's informed that maybe these could be names that pop up. That's how I put it. So this is not like these are definitely going to be. This is like, think of it as like a very early, look. It's not hard when we have like definite. This person has been reached out to. This person's been interviewed. We will get that to you, but it's a little different. It's again informed speculation. We're not throwing these out there willy nilly, but we are. It's not like. Again, it's very early. It's been a day. So current timeline. This is all right. I think you can kind of weed out some of these names. I don't think Taylor Ray leave now. I don't think Wellner would leave now. Like even if I don't know if he would have begin with, but I don't think now. Joe Alberici and was targeted, by Alana Roman when she was at Hopkins, but he ain't leaving Army at this point. Maybe some names a little more. Consider the time, maybe still be interested. If you're not going to get Alberici, could you maybe look at Kyle Gorgelis, the defensive coordinator, who's done a very, very good job with that defense a long period of time? You was at Cornell at one point, so Ivy League, experience, kind of accustomed to it. I think that could be an interesting name. Pat Myers, perhaps, was a Penn assistant at one point in time. I don't know if that's but I mean, like he has the experience. Murphy was a Penn assistant before they hired him, doing a very good job at Lafayette right now. Got them to the Patriot League semifinals this year. So I think that's a worth kind of keeping potentially in mind as maybe someone who's more, Penn would be a significant up. It'd be a big jump. Like the Penn's a better job than Lafayette. Doesn't mean you take it. He might be doing great at Lafayette, but it is someone where you can look at as, hey, like you're definitely taking a elevation in terms of the job. It's not a lateral move. It would be a bump up. Could you maybe still take around a Bernhardt or Wojcik potentially if those guys are really itching to be head coaches? If not, then I would say probably not. But maybe assistants, head coaching jobs don't come around. I think it's going to be much harder. Not to say they won't, but I think it's going to be harder to pull a sitting head coach at this point right now than it would have been before. I think an assistant maybe would still jump at it just because, again, we talk about head coaching jobs don't come around all the time, and a head coaching job as good as this doesn't come around, all the time. All right. Who they're going to target versus now maybe let's say who's more attainable. Say if you have a point we'll make.
Couple points. I'd be calling Poley and Myers nonstop, or just targeting them. Because I think and it's just the landscape of colleges in general. I think not that I'm trying to throw shade at the Patriot League schools, but it's just things being in turmoil for expensive liberal arts schools. Let's just be honest. It may be not a bad idea to just there's a kind of really nice life raft coming here. As I say, again, I'm not trying to slander any schools, but 100%. I think moving from Lafayette, Central PA to Philly, would be alluring. And I think he probably has a little bit of more cachet than a normal Patriot League coach who's just kind of has some recent success at a Moorbound program because of the brother connection. Shout out to Coach Nick, Big Nick, but he's still the Team USA coach, right? Isn't he?
Maybe I think he might be. But Pat's been at North Carolina and Penn. I mean, he's coached at big programs.
Yeah, and
he's got that experience.
Come back home, maybe not exactly home, but that's two people I throw in there. Again, Money Mitch, because as we've seen, Jim Mitchell, if there's an opportunity they can't pass up, has left in June. You have to tell him about June 11th. Just looking at the press release, the most curt press release we've seen. We thought the Myers one was bad. It was just he's not here anymore.
What was the other?
Just straight up, Belmont University announced today that Ben's lacrosse coach, head lacrosse coach, Jim Mitchell, stepped down and will be leaving the university to pursue other professional opportunities. Athletic director
That reminds me.
Scott Weingat. We appreciate his service to our program and we wish him the best. The university will immediately begin a national search. I remember Chris broke it. We did an article together, and the page was zapped. The coaching page that they sent that release out. His page was
that reminded me of I was thinking when you said that, so I'm like, wasn't there a recent one press release that we were just just killed us? It was Cassis. Smith family men's lacrosse head coach Kevin Cassis is stepping away as Lehigh's head coach after accepting an associate head coach position at another institution.
Just wonderful.
Here we go. Kevin Cassis transformed our program into one that is nationally competitive and nationally respected, said Lehigh Dean of Athletics Joe Sterrett, 76. We are deeply grateful to Kevin for his exceptional service and leadership over 16 years. And while we will miss him at Lehigh, we also appreciate and support his decision to pursue a position at an institution he holds in high regard. We wish Kevin and the Cassis family only the very best always. This one was one that was kind of laced with some worth noting, still much more respectful than Penn's 4 lines for Mike Murphy.
Yeah, given the amount of time,
literally just. It's 4. The total word count is probably less than 200. It's insane.
And half of it was about the email for the executive search committee.
Yeah, the search committee. Contact this person.
That's right. Yeah,
holla at them, not me. Them.
Come over here. We got you. But yeah, Money Mitch, and I think he would just fit. From Princeton. Obviously, you said Ivy, immense success at Princeton. Obviously, Madeline's the head coach, but top lieutenants, they're doing real well. It's a natural to kind of go after somebody more prominent in college football and other Big Ten sports. But yeah, top lieutenant for a head coach for a program that's done really well, especially recently. There's no reason that its accolades are warranted. But I also think he's one of these type of, at least his past has shown if there's a good opportunity that can be passed up on, he's willing to make a life-changing move, even in June. Peter Milne, hear me out.
Okay, let's get into this. So
not. You kind of made it.
Let me do my. I'll do this. Who I think they're going to target. So again, based off of what Lana Wren did last time when she was at Hopkins. She aimed big. She told Andy Shea was contacted. Joel Barisi was Andy Shea, I'm pretty sure was offered the job. Joel Barisi was contacted. She went for some kind of big hitters off the top. And then it settled into more of a different group of names, such as Dan Chamati, Sean Nadalin. I don't know if Marr got a look, but Milliman, who eventually got the job. I think this might follow a similar path here. They will call some pretty significant names, see if they're interested. I don't think those names will be interested. And then they will get down to kind of the names we've just mentioned, who are probably more attainable, such as a Ryan Poley, Myers, maybe an assistant such as a Bernhard Wojcik, or as safe you mentioned, Mitchell, Andy Baxter, maybe some of those names that are maybe more attainable. I think I'll get this one out of the way because it feels like this is kind of coming up. I would not be surprised at all if they call Dan Chamati, just because I think everyone's going to call Dan Chamati. Dan Chamati's not going to Penn. I'd be shocked, is how I would put it. I mean, listen, if this comes back to bite me in 10 days or whatever, fair enough.
We'll clip it and post it.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're counting. But again, Dan Chamati was contacted by Lon for the Hopkins search. He turned it down. If you turn down Johns Hopkins, I'm just not sure. It's a different point now. It's not COVID or whatever it may be. But again, the timing isn't exactly pristine, as we just mentioned. Do I think Chamati could be contacted? Yes. Do I think he's no? I think that she'll probably contact Joe Alberici again. Don't think it's going to happen. Could I see a Ray maybe contacted potentially? And then, could I see Milliman being contacted? Yes. Look, she hired the guy once before.
So what was it? And probably in part because Jennifer Baker, as my associate vice provost of student affairs, was at Cornell with Milliman, and I think her and Ren and Shanahan at the time collaborated and kind of put it together. I think probably the Cornell connection helped Milliman greatly. But yeah, I think it's worth it because she's already kind of went through an interview process with him, comfortable enough.
It's very easy. Yeah.
Give him the Hopkins job, for one more coveted jobs, and it's maybe he's willing to listen. I'm not saying this season was so bad he's got to get, but it's just that somebody that she's kind of had a part in if hiring for a big time job that wasn't was pretty controversial at the time, at least for the Petro loyalists. And there's some rumblings on the board about some maybe alums not being so happy. What we always say, it's always better get out of Dodge before the mob comes after. You know what I mean?
I'll cut you off before we get clipped in something aggregated, something we don't get aggregated in. I think he will be considered. Just I think he might. If it came out that he gets a call, I'm not going to be surprised. He's in my. They will call him, and it's not attainable. Again, if we sit here in 10 days and he takes the job, all right, I would be shocked. Do I think he'll get called? Yeah, I mean, again, she hired him once before. Try it again. That logic part of it makes sense. The logic of leaving, I
forget. It does help. He re-upped after the quarterfinal game, right?
Yes. Yeah, he's got.
So
it's Hopkins. I mean, job security can change quickly at a job like that. But yeah, he's got I think through 27.
Yeah, there was still the initial contract or something. You know what I mean? 2 years left or something, maybe. I
don't think, again, Chamati, Alberici, Milliman, those were names contacted. Nadalin was contacted. I don't think that one. Just because I think that part of it was more of the Hopkins connection specifically in that part. Also not sure about Nadalin. Nadalin was at Princeton, so maybe. But I don't see it. But I think those are names that they will target. I do not see those as being names that are going to take the job. Names that might, again, moving to so once they get down to a more second tier, I think Poli does make a degree of sense. Maybe Matt Carwick at Colgate. John Galloway's name popped up in the Hopkins search.
That was I knew I was forgetting something. I wrote it down. Galloway, yeah.
Galloway's name did come up in the Hopkins search in 2020 as someone of interest. I think he was maybe involved in the Providence search a couple years ago. So that's a name who I could see once they get down a tier, and some names that could be more attainable. I think I could see that. Pat Myers. Those are names who I think are more once you get to a second tier of names. I don't see. Go ahead.
No, I love that. I'll close with this. If I'm thinking of the profile of the coach that I want, that I think I can take, and I think for etc. Still throw Money Mitch for the attainable part, just because I think he could be convinced if you go. What I think you have either type play assistant, that's why I love Mitchell, so that's why I keep throwing. Or if you're a head coach, if we want a head coach, you need a profile, I think, of a person who feels maybe not, they're breathing down my neck and I'm nearing a hot seat. So not actually kind of a comfortable seat, but maybe you feel like you've maxed out. at that location, and whether it is a convenient time or not, this may not come again because it hasn't. If you've had a good amount of success, you've been there like 7-10 years, like maybe now with your success, you're going to start attracting that attention. But you seem to haven't been. If you're like a Foley, if you're Myers, like maybe hasn't already happened, especially with Foley, you've shown like a string of success. So if this opportunity kind of hasn't really materialized before, strike with the iron's heart type of thing, even if it's like difficult in like June and you're already recruiting, telling people to come to the school that you're at presently, and like 2 weeks later, you're, down in Philly, with Ren doing the handshake and the press conference. Yeah, it'd be awkward. But I think I think if you're like a person who's kind of like, did my time here, did everything I could, kind of maxing out with the resources that we have. And that's the thing, like maybe they buy into that view, the abundance view. They're like, hey, this is cool that got significantly more than what I have here. And I think I can do it. I'm the guy to do it. Because that's what I think with Tillman. Tillman has success, obviously with Navy bringing them to the final championship, right? But as an assistant. But with time at Harvard wasn't that, nothing like,
No.
like hey, we got to get this guy. It wasn't like jumped off the screen. And I think it's just like, maybe I think Foley's done much better than Tillman did at BU. Has done much better than Tillman did at Harvard. And I think you just got to get that. You got to get the right guy who thinks like I should be doing more. I should be the guy doing those Final Four interviews because that drive. You know what I'm saying? Like, and if you get the right guy, and I think like maybe the Foley kind of with that person. I mean, at the end, that's the one I think is attainable. Maybe jump at the opportunity if given, because it may not come again in recent times. Because we're just looking at the top of the Ivy, like they're already kind of like situated and happy with their coaches. Cornell's happy with theirs, obviously. Princeton's happy with theirs. Harvard's probably happy with theirs. Dartmouth, I think, is happy with theirs, and it's just been there. It's a second year for Kerwin. So it's just like not that many opportunities in this kind of conference, and you're not really getting the calls for the ACC and the Big, even though you have had some pretty. Maybe he has, and I'm just not. However, I don't really ever see him bandied about as much as for the rare times those big time positions are open. And it's just like, this is it. This is the time they need somebody. Is a kind of a convenience for both. He's the guy I would, if I had to put my money on. I was like someone they're definitely going to get, but it's just like that's definitely the person they should be targeting because I think he fits their profile of like what we want, what maybe he can build even more given if he's given more resources. So I really love your pick of Foley, and I think that's why it's one of the strongest candidates on this list that we have.
Yeah, I feel like I think you need to look to someone who. What is your edge? What's going to get you to where? Look, it's going to be hard to take Cornell down. It's going to be hard to take Princeton down. What is going? Look, if you're getting rid of Mike Murphy, you want someone better. So, Mike Murphy was a good coach. His teams, at their best, were always fundamentally sound. They did the little things well. They were pretty, solid in terms of their systems on both sides of the ball. He scheduled great, so they always played tough competition. But as far as schematically, I don't know. You never watched Penn and thought they were reinventing the wheel. You never watched them and thought they were doing something super different. Do you want to maybe look for someone who you think, all right, they're going to give us an advantage that is different to what we have, something that give us a leg up? So I think you can go in two paths with that. One, who is the guy out here who is a true, maniac in terms of preparation, like is just attention to detail, preparation off the charts. That was the one thing with Tillman, was that like, yes, the resume at Harvard hadn't quite got there yet, but everyone spoke well of him. It's like, and it's borne out, like this guy, attention to detail, smart he is, as good as it gets. I think you see that kind of in some ways with Cornell with Connor Busick. Always team super prepared, very fundamentally sound, buttoned up. So can you find someone like that? Or can you find someone who maybe does things a little bit different? Like, look at what Lars did when he got to Brown. And listen, sometimes you can go too far with that direction. Brown tried to double down on it with Mike Daly, and it didn't quite work. But can you find someone who maybe does things a little bit differently? That their offense or schematic style. Colgate, look what they do with like their 10-man ride. Is there somebody you find who maybe you think can give you a leg up? I think that's maybe something also worth looking at. I think it's likely that I think they will hire a good coach. Do I think that the coach they hire will jump off the page as being better than Mike Murphy? Maybe not. Probably not, I would venture. But I do think they can come away with a good coach. It's a good job. And even if the time frame does hurt them for sure, but I still think these jobs don't open. I mean, listen, we're seeing now head coaches leave to become assistants at ACC Big Ten schools. This is becoming a common theme. With that being the case, I think that kind of tells you that the gap between the top-notch jobs and the other jobs is growing and growing. Is Penn a top 10 job? No, but I do think it's one of those jobs that you look at and say, all right, can I make a Final Four here? Yeah, you can make Final Four. Like that's I know they haven't done it in a long time, but they got pretty darn close. I mean, they were right there in the quarterfinals very, very recently. And so if you're a coach who, I think we saw Cassis, we saw Dirna, we're seeing James Purpura leave jobs where they probably looked at it and said, I don't think I can ever get to a Final Four at this job. Or maybe even in case of like Purpura and like Dirna, I don't think this job is going to get me to a job where I can make the Final Four. Like, I don't think I can launch pad from here to that. Penn is a job where you can make the Final Four. And if you're a coach, that's kind of all you're looking for, right? There's not many programs out there who, I would say there's probably 15 jobs where you could. I'm trying to think. There's 6 Big Ten jobs. There's 5 ACC jobs. There's Georgetown, Denver, maybe Loyola, and then
it's 14.
14. Then Yale, Cornell, Princeton, Penn, Brown. There's 18 jobs. There you go. So it's top 20. It is a job where top 20 jobs are, I think. Now, listen, there's different tiers to that. I can get to the Final Four here once versus I can win a national championship. That's a big difference. I can get to the Final Four routinely. That's the difference. But if it's a job where you can say, if all goes right, I can make the Final Four, yes, I think Penn is in that grouping. So that's all you're kind of asking for. So I still think there's definitely good candidates who will consider this job. But we'll see. Let's see how it goes. Save any final thoughts before we move into some of these questions?
I don't know. I think we that's great. It's great content. Obviously, sorry to hear from Coach Murphy, but they definitely got across Twitter his attention last night. So.
All right. From at Turpman878, he asks, which Pressler coaching tree candidate is best? Dan Chamati, Taylor Ray, or Kevin Cassis?
Chamati.
Yeah.
And still ascending, I think what's happened UVA this year kind of put a bit of a dent in Cassis's resume. Like they can't bounce back. But that and Ray, I think he was right behind Chamati. Chamati clutch in terms of making the, because I was going to do a whole Chamati and Poli look at it. It's like not even that fair. Like he's got
Chamati's
like
different.
6 NCAA tournaments. Got the quarterfinal under his belt. Poli's one tournament, and that's it. One conference championship in 2022. He's been close. They've had good season. You can make an argument that the Patriot League was maybe a little bit stronger, but both programs started in 2014, and just what Chamati's done since he's been there, it's undeniable. He's like probably the best coach outside of the ACC and Big, and close up there to Ivy.
Like Poli's
Connor and Madeline.
Poli's argument is, which like, or maybe other coaches are like, is like the Patriot League is a much tougher challenge in terms of making. That's fair. Listen, I think Poli's great, but the thing with Chamati, with Chamati, you might mention like the different leagues they've been in. The problem with that is he built the program, so it's like everything, like their ceiling of what they've been able to do. No one else in their, it's not like anybody else in the A-Sun was doing what they were doing.
Yeah,
the High Point made the tournament, I think, twice. Jacksonville hadn't done it. They've gone now to the A10. It's not like anybody in the A10 has been regularly making. UMass hasn't made a tournament in 7 years.
Michigan's only like 2 years younger, and they've only made 2 tournaments.
Yeah, so it's not even like comparing them. I don't think it's comparing. I think it's comparing them to their peers. Like St. Joe's is probably the most similar team in them, as far as like consistency the last 4 or 5 years, but they're making the tournament more often. You look at Towson even. Had kind of a similar Richmond-like run in the 2010s, but took a couple years down there. The worst year Richmond has had in the past, I mean, since he's got there, is the last time they were not in the mix to make the tournament. They made it in 2025. 2024, I think they lost the conference championship game or maybe the semifinals, but they were 10-6, second in their league. 2023, they made it. 2022, they made it. 2021, they lost their conference championship game. Pretty sure. 2019, they made it. 2018, they made it. 2017, they won 12 games. They were 6-1 in the SoCon. 2016, 11-5, 6-1. 2015, 11-5. Like, they have been in the mix to make the tournament every single year since he's been, since the program started. Every year.
He's never won less than 10 games and not make the tournament except for once. The first year, they're 6-11. They still made it to the NCAA play-in game, even going below 500. And the 2021 year, when they went 7-6, and as you noted, they lost the conference tournament. So he essentially made the tournament every year, or had a double-digit win season.
Here you go. 2014, they make the NCAAs. They lost in the plan, but still, first year. 2015, they won
11 games.
11 games, and they lost in this conference tournament semifinal. 2016,
undefeated in the conference.
Yes. 2016, they lost to Air Force by 1 goal in the conference tournament final. So they were 1 goal away from making the tournament. 2017, they went 12-4. They lost to Air Force in the conference tournament championship game. 2018, made the tournament. 2019, made the tournament. 21, they lost to High Point in the conference championship game. 2024, they went 10-6, lost to St. Joe's in the Richmond has made a conference championship game for
ever.
I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 straight years. For nearly 10 straight years, they have either made the tournament or been 1 game away from making the tournament.
And it's really that's the comparison with Ray is apt. It's just that 2 or 3 more times they won and crossed over and got into the NCAA tournament, and St. Joe's has.
Yeah, and Ray had. I mean, this year St. Joe's wasn't really quite there, and Ray had 1 or 2 years in there where they were down. Chamati doesn't have a down year. I mean, just period. They win 11, 11, 12, 11, 10, 7. That was the COVID year. Where their non-conference slate, they played 2021, they went 7-6, and the teams they lost to were In 21, they lost to Loyola, North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, Air Force, and High Point. Like, all but one of those teams made the tournament. No, Chamati is, yeah, I think he's the best candidate for pretty much any job. I just don't think, look, I'll put it simply. I think he's waiting on one job. If he doesn't get that job, would he maybe start to reconsider going somewhere else? Maybe. But for right now, I think there's only one job that's pulling him out of Richmond. And it's hard to argue with him. He knows he can get to the tournament pretty much any year. Now they've made the quarterfinals, which was the only mark kind of against, was being able to win a tournament game and kind of beat a big-time opponent in a late in the year. Or, that was the only thing against them. They just did it. They'll have a very good team again next year. So, yeah. He's definitely the best candidate, but I don't see him taking any job that's not Duke. And I don't know if he'll get the Duke job, but I think that's the thing I think he would take Duke. I don't think he would take anything else right now. All right. One more. Lax defense coach asks, is it possible there was some financial trigger in the contract for the AD to pull the plug when they did? Or did some other program support step forward with the check to make the deal happen when they couldn't? We don't know. That's a very good question. We'll try and get more information on that. It is close to the end of the fiscal year. But I don't know why that would make it any more cheaper than it would have been 2 months ago. I don't think his contract, I don't believe was running out, just based on the nature of as we talk about the press release statement. This doesn't seem to be a contract. Maybe it was. But in which case, even if that's the case, I still don't think that you have to make this move now if the contract was expiring. You just pay out the rest of his contract, and which is a couple months, and he's done. So the reason you wait till a coach's contract is that it's just there's no you're not on the hook for anything at that point. In which case, even if his contract was expiring, I still don't know why it would be. Again, I'm not saying there isn't a financial deal, but I just don't know what it could be that would make it now.
They, like many schools, been hit with some changes to federal spending. Obviously we don't have too much politics, but just being so close to Philly, I just see a lot of articles about Penn, and there's been a hiring freeze since March. They let go 349,000 Penn medicine employees, but there is let's save our pennies here, because Penn leaders said that the scope and pace of the possible disruptions we face may make them more severe than those from previous challenges, such as the
Hang on now.
Or COVID.
So you said there was a hiring freeze.
Yeah.
For all employees for Penn?
So I'm trying to fit. There's they had to cut back on research because they lost a bunch of money. But yeah, Penn freezes hiring again. I'm just making sure it's not just.
What's the date on that?
Penn medicine, but yeah, all the stuff came around in March. So, yeah, all the stuff.
The University of Pennsylvania will freeze most staff and faculty hiring to prepare for cuts to federal funding. That the Ivy League school expects to be more disruptive than the 2008 recession and the COVID-19 pandemic.
Proactive financial measures. In response to these challenges, Penn has initiated several measures: hiring freeze, a freeze on staff hiring with exceptions for critical positions, and those funded by active grants. That's the big thing. Capital spending review, a review of capital spending for new buildings. Review of faculty hiring, restricting faculty searches to only those deemed essential to the university's mission and highest priorities. This is the one, expense reduction, a 5% reduction in non-compensation expenses.
So it doesn't seem like it was. It seems like, I guess, there were some carve-outs there in terms of the hiring freeze for something like this.
But yeah, the entire environment is like, we're not.
That does make it. That does make it even with the timing even weirder. Honestly, like making a move now, considering all of that going on, that feels like something that would make you not make a move, unless maybe to the second part of the question.
Someone came in.
Yeah, and maybe someone just came in now, like they just kind of got the money together now to make the move. That could be part of it. Again, emphasis on could be. We're not sure, but we'll try and dive into it more. Worth looking into. All right, that's 2 hours. Nothing like us. I didn't think we'd go 2 hours, but we did. It was chock full of information. We hope this was informational, educational, entertaining. That's always our goal. So when we have more information, if we have it to share, we will share it with you. This will go up wherever you get your podcasts. We will also download the video to YouTube as well. Here's what we're looking for you to do. On the YouTube, subscribe to the Crosse Commission on YouTube. If you watch this YouTube video, hit the like button on there. Leave us a comment either there or on Twitter for what off-season top pod conversations you want to see us address. It could be anything. It could be about a particular program. It could be about, I don't know, house settlement stuff. It could be about evergreen, something that's just, but whatever you guys want to hear in the off-season, let us know, and we will do a pod on it. So leave that in the comments on YouTube. You can leave that on at our Twitter page. You can DM us, whatever you'd like. We'll add to our list. If news breaks further between now, and the next week or two, we'll be back on. If not, I think our next pod might be. I was thinking July 4th, somewhere around there before this, but now we just did a pod this week. So maybe somewhere early in July. Look out for it. We have a topic in mind for our next show. So look out for that. And other than that, stay hydrated. It's a heat wave out there. Becky Lynch for president, and we will see you out there.
Enjoy, folks.